Hello, Mishpucha, it's Courtney, America's Jewish mother. Welcome back to my channel, and I'm here today with a weekly reading update and check-in. It's not quite a Friday reads because I didn't manage to get it together to do this video on Friday, so it'll be more of a weekend reads thing. So this past week I finished 2 books. I'm currently reading 3 books. Yeah, that sounds right. So let's go! Also in this video, I'm going to give you a little rundown of the best books that I read in the month of July. But I'll do the weekly reading check-in stuff first. So first, this past week, I finished The Lost Shtetl by Max Gross. So this novel came out a couple of years ago at this point. It's a debut novel for Max Gross, who is a Jewish-American author, in 2020. It came out a couple years ago. So the premise of this is that in a remote Polish village, there is a small Jewish village that somehow became cut off with the outside world. And, you know, in the 21st century, everyone's still living their lives as if it was the 19th century, more or less. And finally, when an incident happens in the village that's serious enough to merit sending someone to the closest neighboring town to get the police involved, because there's no police force in this town, in this shtetl, they, realize, oh my gosh, this small, town has totally missed, like, the entire 20th century, basically. So 2 world wars, the Holocaust, the Cold War, rapid industrialization and modernization of technology, just everything, right? So I liked this book, so that's the premise. So I liked this book overall. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I would definitely read something else by Max Gross if he writes any other novels, but I did have some issues with this. One was that I felt like the story itself was kind of all over the place, because in parts we follow the man who is sent from the shtetl, which is called Kreskol, that's right. In part we follow that man whose name is Yanko. We follow him to the nearest Polish village and kind of see what his experience is like while he's there, and how he's taking in all the modernity surrounding him, and then we follow him again later on, and the sort of budding romance that he has with another character. So that's part of this. The other part of it is we see how the villagers who live in the shtetl, the Kreskolites, if you will, how they react to developing modernization of everything. Because once the shtetl is discovered, the Polish government comes in and quickly says, like, okay, we're gonna put you on the electric grid, we're gonna connect you to the water supply, we're gonna build a post office, we're gonna put roads that come to here, you're gonna have to exchange your old really super outdated currency for updated currency, etc., etc. And the village is sort of divided between those who are fearful of all of this new change and progress and everything, and those who want to embrace it. So that's the other part of the story. And then the third part of the story is a bunch of backstory about Kreskol. So, what it was like before it became Kreskol, how it became cut off from the outside world to begin with, etc., etc. So I didn't really like that the story was kind of all over the place. To me, of those 3 things that I just told you, by far the most interesting plot line to me was the division between the Kreskolites in terms of, the people who wanted to embrace the new changes that were happening, or were at least on board with them, versus the people who were like, no, this is terrible, and, we shouldn't accept any of this stuff, and blah, blah, blah. So to me, that whole fight between progress versus tradition was again the most interesting part, and I wish there had been more focus on that. There's too much focus for me on Yankel. I don't think he's that interesting of a character, to be quite honest, to be carrying the story. So I didn't much care for the focus on him or the budding romance, and definitely I feel like all of the backstory we got about the town of Kreskel was like a bunch of maybe editorial suggestions that Max Gross got. You know, things like, well, you know, we want to know how Kreskel became cut off from the outside. Like, no, I don't care. This is a novel. I will just take it on faith that the town was cut off from the outside world. And if you need to explain to me, you know, that badly how it got cut off, that's fine. But do it like in one chapter. I don't need like a multi-chapter saga about Kreskel's history. Like, again, it's not that interesting. So overall, I liked it. And I would recommend it if you don't mind a story that's, again, like I said, a little all over the place. I do think this is kind of a brilliant fable for modern day Judaism in its way. I think it does a really good job of showing how, on the one hand, you have clinging to tradition and the way things have always been, and also the fact that, you know, ultimately is our ancestral inheritance. But on the other hand, you have progress, you have modernity. It seems like some changes should be made to accommodate the 21st century and, you know, eventually beyond. So I think it's smart on that level, but I think if I just look at it as an actual story, it doesn't work as well as I would like. So I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, but, you know, would still recommend it if you think you would be into something like that. The other book I finished this past week was one that I've been reading for months now, and that was Ralph Ellison's essay collection, Shadow and Axe. Ellison published this in 1953, is that right? Maybe. It also says 1964, so I'm not sure which of those is the right date. I'll look it up and I'll put it over here somewhere. So this is an essay collection. It's divided into 3 parts. The first part really talks a lot about the African American experience, and especially in relation to American democracy and how we in America often fail to live up to the ideals of democracy that we have set for ourselves because we're not giving the same rights to all citizens equally. We're not, you know, listening to everyone's voices equally, etc., etc. And I really loved the essays in the first part because I just felt like there were pearls of wisdom, like, you know, every other page, more or less. So that portion of this was 100% a 5-star read for me. The second part of this focuses more on jazz music and musicians. And that was interesting, but not as interesting to me as the other stuff. So that part was more middle of the road for me. And then the last portion is kind of miscellaneous stuff, including 2 unpublished essays that Ellison wrote. And that was sort of in between the other 2 for me. So overall, I ended up giving this 4 stars. I did like it. I would absolutely recommend it if you are a student of African American history or literature, or, you know, enjoy reading about big picture ideas like American democracy, and the philosophy behind that, and again, like I said, how we sort of failed to live up to that ideal. Or if you're into music, you would really like the second section, probably, especially jazz and blues and things of that sort. So yeah, really liked it overall, would definitely recommend it, 4 stars. So that's what I finished this past week. In terms of what I'm currently reading, I am very close to finishing Julia Alvarez's novel, How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents. I am, yeah, not very far from the end of that, maybe about 40 pages as of this recording. So I will finish that up today or tomorrow, and tell you my thoughts about it next week. It's definitely kind of middle of the road for me right now, but I'll let you know if that changes. I'm also, and I'm reading that as an ebook, so I don't have it here to hold up and show you. I'm also listening to Clint Smith's How the Word is Passed on audio, and that is for the finals round of the BookTube Prize in nonfiction, so I cannot tell you my thoughts about it, but I will record them elsewhere when I have finished it. I have a little bit over an hour left in that audiobook, so I'm probably going to finish that up today or tomorrow as well. And I also started Portnoy's Complaint by Philip Roth. I am about 40 pages into this, and so far there has been lots of masturbation, so there you have it. Lots of masturbation and angsting. And I have chuckled a few times, so I have hopes for this. I have hopes. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So with that, I'm now going to transition into a July wrap-up of sorts. Now, I read 16 books in the month of July, and a lot of them were audiobooks. And the vast majority of the books that I read were 3 or 3.5 star books. So I don't really feel like it's useful to go over all of those because, again, they were sort of middle of the road to good, fine, whatever. So I decided instead of doing the regular thing I do, which would be to, give you the whole ranking of the 16 books in order from least enjoyed to most enjoyed, I would instead just give you the top 5 of July. So yeah, and all of these except for one I either read as an ebook or listened to as an audiobook, so I have none of them here to hold up and show you. So my number 5 read of the month of July was Sujata Massey's The Widows of Malabar Hill. I covered this in a previous Friday Reads from maybe 2 weeks ago at this point. So this is a... Sorry, one of the dogs had a cord in their mouth, so that was a little alarming. So anyway, so this is a mystery that's set in 1920s Bombay. It's the first book starring Parveen Mistry, who is the first female solicitor in India. And it's a dual timeline story, so in the 1921-22, whatever the modern day timeline of the book is, involves Parveen solving a mystery of sorts that's related to her father's law firm, and then the past timeline is set in like 1917, and it explores Parveen's previous relationship with this man, and you find out why she's estranged from him, more or less. And I thought the book was a little bit difficult to get into at first, but it definitely picked up speed for me around the halfway point, and then I sped through the rest of it. And I really liked it overall, and I really like Parveen as a character, and I would like to continue on in the series, so I gave that book 3.5 stars, and that was my number 5 read of the month. My number 4 read of the month was Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys. So this was a book that I listened to on audio. It was narrated by J.D. Jackson. He did a terrific job. I read this, or listened to this rather, way back in early July, so I don't even think I covered it in a previous Friday Reads video. But I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. This is also a book with a sort of dual timeline. So in one timeline, you have Elwood Curtis, who used to be a student, inmate, whatever, of the fictional Nickel Academy for Boys, along with his friend Turner, whom he met there. And the Nickel Academy for Boys is based on the real-life Arthur G. Dozier School for Boys, which was in Florida. And, pretty much it was just a complete horror show. Hard labor, sexual assault, beatings, putting people in solitary confinement, and boys dying, and no one caring about it, or bringing these people to justice. So that's more or less what happened at both the real life Arthur G. Dozier School for Boys and also the fictionalized version of it that we get in the Nickel Academy. So in the earlier timeline, you sort of see how Elwood winds up at the Nickel Academy. and how he meets Turner and how their relationship sort of develops. And so there's a lot of back and forth between the two timelines. And the story is not really linearly told, and I understand because of something that happens at the end, which, by the way, audibly made me gasp. But when that thing at the end happened, I was like, oh, you know. Really considered bumping up my rating just for that, but I also thought, well, if I just bumped up my rating because of something that happened at the end, like, I don't know. So anyway, so I understand why Whitehead does this non-linear timeline thing that he does, but I kind of really wanted to know more about the characters than we got, and I wanted to, even though they were horrible, I kind of wanted to see more of their experience at the Nickel Academy, because even though you would think that would take up the bulk of the novel, it really doesn't. So I kind of wanted just a longer book with more fully fleshed out characters. But you know, again, Whitehead won the Pulitzer Prize, so what do I know? So I gave that 3.5 stars. So that was my number 4 read of the month. My number 3 read of the month was Women Talking by Miriam Toews. This is a book that I think I wrapped up in my last Friday Reads video, and it was a BookTube darling a few years ago when it came out, so I don't really think it needs that much introduction for me. It is based on real life events, just like The Nickel Boys was. It was based on events that happened at a Mennonite colony in Bolivia in South America, where women were drugged and raped repeatedly for years, until it was, found out that it was obviously men in the colony who were doing this. And it wasn't just women in the colony who were being drugged and raped in the night, it was also children. And like I said, this went on for years. So Women Talking tells a fictionalized version of this story and has the women meet secretly in a hayloft while the men of the colony are away to post bail for the assailants. So they talk and decide whether they're going to stay and fight or whether they're going to leave before the men come back. So I quite like this overall. I ended up giving it 3.75 stars. I didn't like as much that it's so heavily focused on the male narrator August. And some people suggested to me when I wrapped this book up before that August sort of serves to underscore just how repressed and oppressed the women are, because he, they can't even take minutes of the meeting for themselves because they're illiterate, right? So it shows sort of how focused on the men this religious sect really is. And I understand that point of view, but I'm still just like, but it was written by a woman and it's called Women Talking, so less men talking, less August talking. But I liked it, 3.75 stars. So my number 2 read of the month was the play Venus by Suzan-Lori Parks. This is about the life of Saartjie Baartman, who was exhibited in freak shows in both England and France under the name The Hottentot Venus. So this is an experimental play, but I thought Parks did a great job of showing how this woman was exploited in a number of ways, medically, her body, right, financially, and then also sexually. And I also thought at the same time she did a really good job of giving voice to some of Baartman's unrealized hopes and desires. So that was a really good read, 5 stars. And then the best book that I read in the month of July was Patrick Radden Keefe's Empire of Pain, which I read for the semifinals round of the BookTube Prize. And I wrapped that up in my BookTube Prize reading vlog from last round. So this was a 5-star read for me. It will very likely be the best work of nonfiction that I read all year. Empire of Pain is about the Sackler family who own Purdue Pharma and their role in the opioid crisis in the United States. And truly, these people are the scum of the earth, and I'm glad that this book exists so that more people will read it and know about them. So that was the best book that I read in the month of July. So thank you for watching this. If you have thoughts about any of these books, I would love to hear that. please feel free to leave me a comment down below. I hope everyone is staying healthy and well. I hope you're doing good reading whatever you're reading. And until next time, would it kill you to call your mother?